7 of Operation Epic Fury, U.S. Special Forces rescued the second crew member of the F-15E fighter jet that was shot down over Iran. Saturday's operation was conducted by a specialized commando unit with a high volume of air cover. The U.S. forces unleashed a hail of heavy fire, and that all of the forces are now out of Iran. This wasn't just some easy pickup though. This happened right in the heart of the incredibly rugged Zagros Mountains.
Hey, everybody, good to have you. Welcome back. Today we're stepping into a story that feels like something out of a high-intensity war film, but this is real, and it unfolded in one of the most dangerous environments possible. A rescue mission deep inside hostile territory, under constant threat, with the odds stacked against everyone involved. This is the story of Operation Epic Fury, and how, on day 37, U.S. Special Forces pulled off a rescue that many believed might not be possible. Let's take it from the beginning. On April 5, 2026, U.S. Special Forces successfully rescued the second crew member of a downed F-15E Strike Eagle inside Iran. This wasn't just any recovery mission. This was the extraction of a high-value officer, a weapons systems officer, a colonel who had been stranded behind enemy lines after his aircraft was shot down. And when we say hostile territory, we're talking about the Zagros Mountains. Rugged, isolated, difficult terrain that stretches across western Iran. Not the kind of place where rescue operations are easy. Not the kind of place where you can move quickly without being seen. The F-15E had been brought down days earlier, and when the crew ejected, they were separated. That separation alone changed everything. Because now, instead of one coordinated survival scenario, there were two isolated individuals in enemy territory, each with their own situation, their own risks, and their own timeline. The pilot was located and rescued first, but even that mission came at a cost. That initial rescue operation, carried out the day after the crash, was intense. Helicopters came under fire. Some were damaged. There were casualties involved. It was not a clean extraction. It was a fight. And that set the tone for everything that followed. Because if the first rescue was that dangerous, the second was expected to be even worse. Now, the colonel, the second crew member, was alone, injured, behind enemy lines. And for nearly 48 hours, he managed to avoid capture. That doesn't happen by accident. This is where training comes into play. Survival, evasion, resistance, and escape seer. This is the kind of training designed for exactly this scenario. Operating in hostile environments, avoiding detection, managing injuries, conserving energy, and maintaining communication when possible. Reports indicate that the colonel moved carefully, using terrain to his advantage, staying out of sight, and relying on encrypted signaling to communicate with U.S. forces. Not constant communication because that would risk detection, but controlled, strategic bursts of information. Enough to let them know he was alive. Enough to help them narrow down his location. But every signal also carried risk. Because at the same time, Iranian forces were actively searching for him. And not just casually. This was a full-scale manhunt. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, along with local militia groups, mobilized quickly. Search teams were deployed across the region. Roads were monitored. Airspace was watched. And in a move that added another layer of danger, reports indicate that cash rewards were being offered to civilians who could provide information leading to the capture of the American officer. Now think about that for a moment. You're injured. You're hiding. And not only are trained forces looking for you, but potentially anyone in the surrounding area could become a threat. That changes everything. It means every movement has to be calculated. Every decision has consequences. Meanwhile, on the other side of this operation, the United States was assembling one of the most coordinated special operations responses possible. This wasn't a single-unit mission. This was a multi-layered deployment involving some of the most elite forces available. Air Force Pararescue Specialists, PJs, trained specifically for combat search and rescue. Navy SEALs, Delta Force operators, Army Rangers, Green Berets, each with a role. Each bringing a specific capability to the mission. And above them, supporting everything, was a network of air power and surveillance that turned the operation into a full-spectrum effort. A 10 Thunderbolt aircraft, known for close air support and heavy firepower, were positioned to provide cover if things escalated. MQ-9 Reaper drones were in the sky, tracking movement, monitoring terrain, and feeding real-time intelligence back to command. Special operations helicopters were prepared for rapid insertion and extraction. This wasn't just a rescue attempt. This was a coordinated, high-risk operation designed to go into hostile territory, retrieve a downed officer, and get out, without leaving anyone behind. But here's the thing. Even with all that preparation, nothing goes exactly as planned. When U.S. forces finally reached the colonel's location, time became the most critical factor, because Iranian forces were closing in. And what followed was not a quiet extraction. It turned into a firefight. A serious one. Heavy weapons were used. Air support was called in. The kind of engagement where every second matters, where decisions have to be made instantly, and where the margin for error is almost non-existent. This was the moment where everything could have gone wrong. Because once you're engaged like that, you're not just extracting, you're fighting your way out. And in that kind of environment, with terrain limiting movement and enemy forces converging, the situation can escalate very quickly. Despite that, the teams on the ground executed the mission. They secured the colonel, alive, though injured, and began the extraction process. But even then, it wasn't over. Because getting to the target is one thing, getting out is another. During the exfiltration phase, complications arose. Some aircraft were disabled in the sand, something that can happen in desert and mountainous environments where landing conditions are unstable and unpredictable. And when that happens, you don't just leave equipment behind. Disabled aircraft were destroyed on-site to prevent them from being captured or exploited. That's standard procedure, but it adds time, risk, and complexity to an already dangerous situation. Replacement aircraft were brought in. Coordination had to be maintained under pressure. And all of this was happening while the threat environment remained active. But in the end, the extraction was completed. All U.S. personnel were evacuated from Iranian territory. The colonel was brought out alive. And perhaps most importantly, there were no U.S. fatalities during this final rescue mission. Now, that doesn't erase the risks that were taken. It doesn't diminish the danger of what happened. But it does highlight something that has been repeated time and time again in military operations: the commitment to not leave anyone behind. And this mission reinforces that in a very real, very visible way. Because this wasn't easy. This wasn't quick. This wasn't guaranteed. It required coordination across multiple units, real-time intelligence, advanced technology, and individuals on the ground willing to move into one of the most dangerous situations imaginable. And even then, it came down to execution under pressure. Now, stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, this operation also sends a broader message. It demonstrates capability. It shows how modern special operations integrate air power, surveillance, and ground forces into a single, coordinated effort. And it highlights the level of training and preparedness required to operate in environments where conditions can change in seconds. But beyond all of that, at the center of this story is a person. An officer who survived a crash, avoided capture, and held out long enough for a rescue that required extraordinary effort to complete. And a team of individuals who went in to bring him back. This is the kind of story that doesn't end with a simple headline. Because behind every detail, every movement, every decision, there are layers of planning, risk, and human endurance that don't always get fully captured. But today, we do know this. The mission was completed. The colonel is alive. And everyone who went in came out. And in a situation like this, that outcome matters. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for taking the time to understand the full scope of what happened. Stay aware, stay informed, and I'll see you next time.